Right now, buried underneath a mountain range in central Iran, there is enough highly enriched uranium to permanently alter the balance of power in the Middle East and light a fuse that could touch every corner of the world, not theoretically. Not as a worst-case scenario buried in an intelligence annex that nobody reads. Right now. Today. And what should make your blood run cold? What should make you furious that this story has been allowed to quietly fade from the American news cycle is that this threat didn't diminish. The uranium didn't go anywhere. The bunkers didn't collapse. The danger didn't dissolve just because television anchors stopped talking about it and Washington moved on to the next political circus. This is the story about the top-secret ground raid option on Isfahan, the classified mission scenario that was being discussed seriously at the highest levels of American military and intelligence planning. The operation that was designed to do what bombing apparently cannot: physically seize Iran's highly enriched uranium and remove it from Iranian hands forever. It was a real option. It was on the table. And then, like too many inconvenient truths in American national security reporting, it went quiet. The question this demands, the question that should not be allowed to die quietly in the back pages, is whether that silence means the mission was ruled out, whether the window has already closed, or whether we are watching the slow disappearance of America's last viable path to actually finishing what this entire campaign was supposed to accomplish. This is the Iran uranium situation as it stands in 2026, and you deserve every word of truth inside this story. If this kind of journalism, the kind that refuses to look away, that chases the story even after the media moves on, that treats national security with the seriousness it demands, matters to you, then hit subscribe right now. No algorithm games. No sponsored content telling you what to think. Just accountability reporting that pulls no punches. Hit the bell. Turn on all notifications. Do not miss what's coming. Let's be completely clear-eyed about where we actually are in this conflict. Because the version that most Americans are getting from mainstream coverage is a sanitized, diplomatically softened picture that papers over a reality that is far more unstable and far more dangerous. Yes, there are negotiations happening. That word negotiations implies progress. It implies two parties moving toward each other, making concessions, finding common ground. That is not what is happening. What is happening is that both sides continue to exchange fire. Iranian forces have continued targeting commercial and military shipping in the region throughout 2026, and those attacks have continued to draw American military responses. The shooting has not stopped. The conflict has not ended. What exists is not peace and not a genuine ceasefire. It is a grinding, unresolved military confrontation with intermittent violence dressed up in diplomatic language because nobody wants to use the word war anymore. And the man now running Iran has made the central strategic question brutally clear. Iran's new supreme leader, Mohammad has not moderated the position of his predecessor. He has reinforced and hardened it. He has communicated, without ambiguity, that Iran is not surrendering its highly enriched uranium. Not for sanctions relief, not for international legitimacy, not in exchange for any diplomatic arrangement currently being discussed. That uranium, those stockpiles enriched to 60% and beyond, sitting in those underground bunkers at Isfahan, represents something to the Iranian regime that goes beyond mere military capability. It represents survival. It represents leverage. It represents the ultimate deterrent against the kind of existential threat that the regime believes it faces from the United States and its regional allies. They are not negotiating that away. They never were. This is where the stakes become something that every American needs to sit with, because the consequences are not abstract and they do not stay in the Middle East. There are serious people, not fringe analysts, not online commentators, but senior figures in American national security who have stated plainly that if this conflict ends, in any form, without the physical removal or confirmed destruction of Iran's highly enriched uranium, then the entire campaign will have been strategically insufficient. All of the strikes, all of the operational planning, all of the risk accepted by American military personnel during this campaign. It could all produce an outcome where Iran's ability to eventually construct a nuclear weapon remains intact. Because the uranium is still there. The scientific knowledge is still there. The intent is still there. An intent combined with sufficient fissile material, given enough time, produces one outcome that changes the world. Isfahan deserves more than a passing mention on cable news. It deserves the kind of deep, sustained examination that its strategic significance demands, because most Americans, most people anywhere in the world, have no clear picture of what this facility actually is or why its geography makes it one of the most challenging military problems the United States has ever confronted. Isfahan is home to Iran's nuclear technology center. The highly enriched uranium, enriched to 60% concentration and stored in quantities that represent a genuine proliferation threat, is held in facilities buried underground inside the mountain ranges surrounding the site. And the critical word there is not underground. The critical word is mountain. These are not concrete bunkers dug 20 feet below the surface that a precision-guided munition can crack open on a targeting run. These are fortifications carved into and sheltered beneath massive natural geological formations. Hundreds of feet of solid rock and earth providing cover that no conventional weapon in the American arsenal can reliably defeat. This is why the GBU-57, the massive ordnance penetrator, a 30,000-pound weapon specifically engineered to destroy deeply buried hardened targets, while devastating at Fordow, almost certainly cannot guarantee the destruction of what is stored at the deepest, most protected levels of Isfahan's underground complex. During Operation Midnight Hammer, American forces did use these weapons. They used them effectively at Fordow. The damage was real and significant. But the physical environment at Isfahan, the depth of the facilities, the geological characteristics of the mountain cover, creates a scenario where even multiple GBU-57 strikes against the same location cannot produce certainty of destruction. And on a question of this magnitude, certainty is not a luxury. It is the minimum acceptable standard. You cannot conduct national security policy against a nuclear proliferation threat on the basis of, we probably got it. Probably is not good enough. Not here. That logical gap between what bombing can reliably achieve and what the mission requires is precisely what brought the ground raid option into serious consideration. The reasoning is coldly rational. If air power alone cannot guarantee destruction of the target with sufficient confidence, then the only path to certainty is a physical operation. Get people on the ground, breach those facilities, locate and secure the uranium, load it out, and remove it from Iranian control permanently. Once it's out of Iran and in American or Allied custody, the problem is solved, not delayed, not degraded. Solved. That is the fundamental military logic driving the most audacious mission option in the current strategic landscape. The operational picture of what this would actually require is worth examining in detail, because the gap between how these missions are portrayed in popular culture and what they actually demand in execution is enormous. You are talking about deploying the absolute apex of American Special Operations capability. SEAL Team 6, formerly the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, DEVGRU or Delta Force, formerly 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. These are Tier 1 operators, the most highly trained, most operationally experienced, most capable small unit warriors in the history of modern warfare. These are the people who executed the compound raid in Abbottabad. These are the people who operate in environments that would be considered impossible for conventional forces. And even for them, a mission against Isfahan would represent one of the most complex and dangerous operations in American military history. Getting to the target requires either a covert deep infiltration insertion or a launch from a staging point close enough to Isfahan to allow the helicopters to get in, complete the mission, and get out before Iranian forces can mount an effective response. The breach itself, penetrating hardened underground mountain facilities to locate and secure enriched uranium stored deep within, requires specialized equipment, specialized knowledge, and most critically, time. Time on the objective is the enemy of special operations in hostile territory. Every additional minute that Tier 1 operators are inside those facilities is a minute for Iranian forces to mobilize, to establish blocking positions on extraction routes, to call in ballistic missile strikes on the staging areas supporting the operation. And that threat, the ballistic missile threat to American staging and launch facilities, is not a theoretical concern. Iran has demonstrated a substantial and functional ballistic missile capability. They have shown willingness to use it. The moment Iranian intelligence detects American Special Operations Forces moving on Isfahan, every airfield, every forward operating base, every staging area within range becomes an immediate target. A perfect execution inside the facility can still end in catastrophe if the extraction is cut off or the launch point is destroyed. Now here is where this story goes from serious to extraordinary, where a detail emerged that should have received sustained intensive investigative coverage from every major news organization in America, and instead was treated as a curiosity, analyzed briefly, and then allowed to drop from public consciousness. During the conflict, an American F-15 was shot down inside Iranian territory. The crew, the pilot and weapons officer, required extraction from a hostile environment deep inside Iran. The United States executed a rescue operation to recover them. And the mechanism of that rescue involves something that the American public has never fully been forced to confront in terms of what it implies: the construction of a secret airstrip inside Iranian territory, used to land C-130 aircraft, extract the crew, and then destroyed to prevent exploitation. The strip was built, American aircraft landed on it, personnel were recovered. The strip was then deliberately blown up, with the wreckage of the C-130s visible in satellite imagery afterward. Now process that operational fact against a specific piece of geography. That secret airstrip was located approximately 62 kilometers from Isfahan, from the nuclear technology center where the highly enriched uranium is stored. 62 kilometers. That is not coincidentally close to the most strategically significant nuclear target on the planet. That is operationally close. C-130 aircraft can land at that strip. Offload helicopters operated by the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers, the most elite rotary wing aviation unit in the world, the unit that has supported every major Tier 1 Special Operations mission for decades. And those helicopters can cover 62 kilometers and be on the Isfahan facility in minutes. The sequencing works. The geometry works. The timing works. Open-source analysis of the available evidence has led serious researchers to a conclusion that the mainstream press has been remarkably reluctant to state plainly. That airstrip was almost certainly constructed with the Isfahan ground raid in mind. Whatever the immediate operational trigger for its use, whether the F-15 shoot-down accelerated its deployment before it was intended to be used, or whether the rescue and the raid were always going to be sequential operations, the proximity of that strip to Isfahan was not an accident of geography. This was infrastructure for a mission, and that mission was the seizure of Iran's highly enriched uranium. If you've been watching this and thinking that this is exactly the kind of detailed, substantive reporting that needs to reach more Americans, that the story of what the United States is actually doing and not doing in Iran deserves a wider audience, then do something about it. Subscribe, share this. Leave a comment with what you think. The algorithm responds to engagement, and your engagement is what determines whether this conversation reaches 10,000 people or 10 million. This is not about channel metrics. This is about ensuring that the people who need to hear this analysis actually hear it. Here's the problem that makes everything discussed so far not a story of triumphant planning, but a story of a narrowing window and mounting difficulty. Iran knows. Whatever the precise sequence of events, whatever the specific intelligence pathway by which the information traveled, the Iranian government, and specifically the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, now knows that the United States constructed a secret airstrip inside their territory at operational range from Isfahan. They saw the wreckage. They have been searching. And they have been responding with everything they have. Satellite imagery of Fordow in the aftermath of Operation Midnight Hammer tells a story that every American should be looking at. Before the strikes, the access roads leading to nuclear facility entrance points were relatively unobstructed. After? Barricades. Physical barriers being erected at the choke points, at the road entrances, at the approach vectors that ground forces would have to navigate to reach the underground facilities. Understand what that means tactically. Barricades on access roads are not a countermeasure against airstrikes. Aircraft do not use roads. Those barricades are a countermeasure against a ground assault. The Iranian military is not preparing for another air campaign at these sites. They are preparing for the scenario where American or Allied Special Operations Forces attempt to reach them on foot, in vehicles, or via helicopter-borne assault. The IRGC has been flooding the operational area around Iranian nuclear sites with personnel and materiel. The territory that any ground operation would have to traverse, the terrain between where a staging platform would need to be and where the uranium is held, is now saturated with Iranian military presence. The challenge of constructing another secret airstrip, which is what would be required to relaunch this kind of operation, has become exponentially more difficult. Combat controllers and Air Force, special tactics personnel do have the extraordinary capability to build temporary landing strips in denied environments. That capability was demonstrated spectacularly when the first strip was built. But the process requires time, and time requires a window of relative quiet and concealment. That window, in the area around Isfahan right now in 2026, does not exist. The IRGC is not passively sitting at their bases waiting. They are actively searching. Every stretch of flat terrain within operational range of their nuclear sites is now under far greater scrutiny than at any previous point in this conflict. And every day that passes without the United States executing or abandoning this option is another day Iran spends making it harder to execute. There were conspiracy theories. They circulated widely enough that they deserve a direct response, suggesting that the F-15 crew that was rescued never actually existed, that the downed aircraft and the rescue were a fabricated cover story for a uranium seizure attempt that failed. The C-130 wreckage was real in this theory, but the reason for it was not the rescue of aviators. That theory is not supported by the available evidence and should be dismissed. The shootdown was real. The crew was real. The rescue was a genuine humanitarian extraction operation that succeeded. What is not conspiracy theory, what is grounded in open-source geographic and operational analysis, is the conclusion that the airstrip was also intended for something larger, something beyond that single rescue. But both things can be simultaneously true. The rescue was exactly what it appeared to be, and the infrastructure used for it was also the infrastructure for a mission that has not yet been executed. Here is the assessment that nobody in Washington wants to deliver from a podium. The ground raid option on Isfahan, the operation that represented the last genuinely decisive military path to removing Iran's highly enriched uranium from Iranian hands, is, as of right now in 2026, probably not executable under current conditions, not permanently ruled out. Not impossible in some absolute sense, but the conditions that would allow it to happen, the covert staging infrastructure, the element of surprise, the operational environment, have been severely degraded. The secret airstrip is burned and known. The IRGC is flooding the territory. The ability to reconstitute covert staging capability in the area without detection has become an operational challenge of an entirely different order of magnitude than it was before the F-15 shootdown. The window may not be closed, but it is closing. And closed windows in national security, unlike closed doors, do not simply reopen when you knock. Subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Is the ground option truly gone, or does the United States have a path that isn't visible yet? Is Washington keeping something back, or are we watching a genuine strategic dead end develop in real time? This conversation is worth having. Your voice in it matters. Because the one thing that has always, throughout the history of this country, been capable of forcing accountability from power is an informed, engaged, unrelenting public that refuses to look away when the story gets hard. This story is hard. Do not look away.